This is a Python programming tutorial for intermediate and beginning Blender users. I'm using version 2.63a, and this is a follow-up to parts 1 and 2 of this basic Python programming. And so this was the result of the previous exercise where we were plotting these just simple little designs around a circle like this, but we're going to upgrade it even further now and modularize the code a little bit and just get a few tidbits. So let's get back to our scripting window that we had set up like this. And first thing I had done in this particular one that you hadn't seen before is I added this layer command in here. So bpy.context.scene.layers 0 is equal to true. Now notice these are square brackets that surround the 0. So that indicates that this is an array. And arrays in programming typically start with an index of 0, which means it's the first layer. So what I've done is I'm saying in this case turn layer 1 off. Alright, I mean turn layer 1 on, excuse me, and then turn layer 3 off because it's the second index, 0, 1, 2, which means the third layer. Alright, so I'm going to turn that one off. And I do that just so when I'm actually drawing the objects in the scene with the code that it makes sure that I'm drawing it to that layer. And so I'll show you if I just notice what I had done just recently is I moved all the lights and the plane off to the third layer by themselves, and then I have the objects that we drew, now I have them on the first layer by themselves. And the reason I did that is now I can just select all of them, A key, like that. I select everything, well, except I won't select that light. I'll hold the shift key and deselect that guy, and then I'll delete all of these here, and then I'll shift and click here, and now we're back to our scene. So when this executes, it'll just put it on the first layer, so I can delete it as necessary. Alright, so that's one thing I did. Now the other thing, since now we're starting to get a fair amount of code into the program, well, now you want to start modularizing it. And very typical is when you start a program, you start with a main function, and a lot of times they're called main, and in Python it's called main. So we have to define a function first called main, and a function is just kind of like a grouping of all your programming commands. So we'll first define the function and put things in it, and then we'll call it. So we define it by this term def main open close parentheses and a colon. That's all it takes to define it. But now, since this is going to be within this main function or this main grouping of programming commands, I'm going to have to move all these guys over. So all the programming commands are going to have to tab over one. That indicates they're on the inside of that function. Let's see, keep going. Don't want to move that because that's part of that wraparound line that I have set. And this and that. Okay, there's everything there. So now all the code that we wrote before is within the main function, but then what we have to do is we actually have to call the main function because it won't call itself. So down here we could type in main like this without a colon. And then next thing we'll do before we actually run it is we'll start commenting everything. This is a really important feature. So here I'll say set the layer, set the active layers. See what else I missed down here. I'll just say define a variable for the cube object. Increment the outside radian angle. And this is a habit I suggest you get into immediately. In fact, when I'm coding anything of significance, I comment every single line. And the other thing I do is I make sure that all my variables have meaning to what they do, so it makes sense. Like for instance, when I'm incrementing here 2 pi over 8, I know what that means immediately. So meaningful variables, even if they're bigger, like in this case we had radial distance, well I know that's the radial distance and I can shorthand that, but sometimes I might actually type out distance. I've found over the years that it's actually cleaner and simpler to use longer variable names just because it helps keep your code cleaner, and or if you're using shorter names, make sure that you put a very specific comment in there about it as you go along, because as much as you think you're going to remember every detail, oh no, you won't. No. So this is a really great habit to be into. And let me see. So alright, well, so we have that. Now let's just run it. And we have a failure in the console. Uh-oh, let's see what I did wrong. Get up to console. Unexpected indent, line 35. I thought for sure 35, line 54. Get an object. Oh, that was earlier. Line 35. Oh, there it is. That one little must have somehow hit a space there at the same time. I hope I didn't get all these off by one line, did I? I may have. They look like they're off by one. It is. That's off. That's off. That's off. That's off by one. Okay, let's save that. Let's run it now. Okay, there they are. So it executed it, and then it sees since layer 3 was turned off, I'll just turn it back on like this. And there they are like that. So they're within the main function. So the main function isn't the only thing you want. Actually, sometimes the main function, I can have it a main function, it does nothing but just call other functions. And the other functions might be, you know, in fact, let's do that. Let's create another function. Let's go down here and we'll define no, let's call a function. Alright, hang on, let me think. What do I want to call this guy? Actually, let's do it like this. Let's just put it, let's encapsulate. No, that's not going to work. If I encapsulate all this into the function, then let's try it like this. Def design drawing. That'll be the name of our function. Like that. So now everything's still encapsulated like that. And then within, so this is actually suddenly becomes just part of the design drawing function. Like this. And then main, the only thing main is going to do is called design drawing. And I'm going to type it just like that. I'm going to say call the design drawing function. Like this. And then we call main down there. Okay, let's run it. Let's go into here. Get rid of these guys except for the light. And let's run the script. And there it is. So now really this function is called design drawing. Maybe I have another one called design drawing cursor, which would be, maybe I replicate this by using the cursor the way we initially had done it, by pointing at the screen like that. So this really does help keep your code very organized. And but so while we're here, let's just change the code. Let's just change the code a little bit, since we might as well change the design just a little. And we'll add something else. Let's see, 2 pi. I'll define something else here. Instead of 2 pi over 8, let's define another variable. I'm going to call it 2 pi over 32. So that's the whole distance around the circle divided by 32 segments. So 6.28 divided by 32, right? And then over here, instead of incrementing the angle of measure let's see, around the circle. So on the outer circle, we'll do it as 2 pi 30 over 32. We'll put more in there instead. And in fact, let's just run that. Let's see what happens. So here's a whole bunch more in there like this. Right? Suddenly it kind of gives us this warped looking kind of thing. Huh, who would have thought, right? Who knows? Well, that gives you an idea. Well, anyway, just wanted to give you an idea about setting up your functions. That really helps keep them organized. Also about your layers, and most importantly, about commenting your code each and every time. All right? Well, that's it for this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson.